Most of us are asleep to some degree or another. To some degree, we are caught up and clouded in illusions and mental constructs and thoughts concerning past and future. We don't see and experience reality as it is. We see and experience it through the filter of our beliefs, interpretations, and judgments. And most of us don't want to wake up. We find our illusions familiar and comforting, and as long as there is nothing to disturb us, we remain asleep. Given the choice, we would prefer to stay asleep. We're quite attached to our illusions. We don't want to give up any of that. In fact, it can sometimes be frightening to consider giving up our illusions because they offer us some false sense of certainty or security. And without them, we would have to embrace the unknown. We would have to face uncertainty. We would have to face the reality that all things are impermanent. And worse, we might have to change our behavior. We might have to change the very way in which we live. So we stay asleep. We stay cozy in the comfort of the dream. We stay wrapped up in the blanket of false security where it's warm and soft and cozy. And as long as life is smooth and consistent and comfortable, we can remain like this indefinitely. But every now and then, life shakes us up. Something drastic happens, often something unexpected. It's like an alarm going off, and as much as we would like to just go back to sleep, it's very difficult at that point. These events in life, the ones that seem most unsettling, disturbing, drastic, and even terrifying, can all be taken as a wake-up call, to wake up out of our illusions and face reality as it is, to re-examine our lives and the way we live, to re-examine our beliefs and our behaviors, and to consider a different way of living. So we have to ask ourselves, what might this situation be trying to reveal to us? What lessons does it hold? How can we grow from this experience? What opportunity might it be offering us? And what can we do differently? Whenever there is some great tragedy affecting society or humanity, we call it a crisis, and we tend to think of a crisis as something that can only be terrible. We tend to think of a crisis as some event in which we are at the mercy of the situation, helpless, hopeless, unable to do anything other than to bear it. But actually the word crisis is very fitting because it means a turning point. And if we can truly embrace it as a turning point, then we can transform it into an opportunity for positive change. You see, we're always moving in some direction, and wherever we end up is often due to the direction we take. And unfortunately, the direction that humanity has been moving in for a very long time is in the direction of tragedy. And we have forgotten all about consequence, or we have somehow deluded ourselves into believing that we are immune to consequence, that we can just do whatever we like and not suffer any consequence for our actions, our behavior, our way of life. So whenever we are faced with any sort of crisis, can we reflect? Can we examine how it is we came to this place on the journey? Because if we can understand the series of choices and behaviors that led us here, then we can also change course. We can choose to move in a different direction. Because if we stay on the same course, we risk two possibilities. Either that things get worse, or things return to the way they were before, which means that everything returns to the same conditions which led to tragedy in the first place. And so we eventually end up repeating it later on down the road. So what we are presented with is in many ways an opportunity to change course, an opportunity to learn from our past mistakes, an opportunity to create something better, to live in a better way. So can we see crisis as such? Can we re-examine the way we live, the systems that we depend upon, the things that we value, and so on? And can we choose a better way of living, a simpler way of living, a way of living which is in harmony with one another and with nature? We live in a time when the world is in great upheaval. There is crisis everywhere. Cultural crisis, economic crisis, environmental crisis, all kinds of conflict and destruction, all kinds of instability. Our very existence as a species is on the verge of extinction. Everything seems to be on the verge of collapse, but does any of it have to be this way? A better question is, how did we get to this point? And can we change direction? How might we do things differently? What might be a better course? By looking at the mistakes that we've made along the way, can we learn from all of that? Can we choose a better way, individually as well as collectively? We can take any time of crisis as a time to reflect, a time to re-examine our way of life, our values, and so on. What we're in need of is structural change, cultural change, communal change, and perhaps most importantly, a change in consciousness. What is needed in this time is a revolution in consciousness, or rather a revolution of consciousness, because the way we've been living up to now has not been very conscious. Humanity has been asleep at the wheel, and currently we're headed right for a ravine, so it's time now to wake up and change course. The word revolution also means change, a radical change, a complete transformation. So these two words, crisis and revolution, both point to essentially the same thing, a time of transition, a turning point, a turning away from the old way of doing things and moving in a new direction. And the old way is what? To live unconsciously, compulsively, without consideration, without awareness of consequence, to live primarily for oneself, only to serve oneself, to exploit nature, to exploit one another, to live in excess, to collect and consume as much as one can, to take and take without giving, to indulge in such a way as if there is no consequence for our indulgences. And yet there are consequences, and those consequences are becoming all the more difficult to ignore. It's no wonder the world is so out of balance, why there is so much conflict and destruction, why there is so much poverty and disease, why there is so much environmental devastation, why there is so much unnecessary suffering. We take and take as if there's no end to what we can take. And if things continue the way they have, soon there won't be anything left for us to take. So it's time to change direction. It's time for revolution, for transformation, and it must be a transformation of consciousness. Otherwise, things will just continue on as they have. And there's only so far we can go if we choose to continue in that direction. So we need to become more conscious of who and what we are deep within, and how we are connected to everything. Connected to the world and to one another, connected to nature, not separate, but intimately connected. If we can do this much, everything else will change in accordance, in relation. We don't even have to make an effort. Just by realizing our connectedness and becoming more aware of our behaviors, our behavior changes. If we can realize our connection with nature, we will respect nature, and we won't continue to exploit its resources. In fact, we will have rediscovered our place within the natural world. We will rediscover that our relationship is symbiotic, that not only can we enjoy the many things which nature offers us, but also that we have so much that we can offer in return. And when we give in return, we maintain balance by which we all benefit. If we can realize our connection to one another, we will respect one another. We won't take advantage of one another, but rather we will seek to serve one another. And we will realize that by serving one another, everyone is taken care of and no one goes without. So it all begins with the individual. It all begins within. It all begins by transforming ourselves, or rather by realizing our true nature. And as more and more people wake up, the world will be transformed, because the world is a reflection of our internal state of consciousness. And so every crisis is a turning point, a wake-up call, an opportunity to change the world we live in, to change course, to restore balance to the world. If we have the eyes to see it as such, if we are willing to wake up and change course. If you find value in this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.